It's midday. Greetings and welcome to Men's Radio Station. Greetings, and I've got a slight different profile today. Well, profile's not different. I'm in slightly different surroundings, same room, different surroundings. Thought I'd give you another point of view, and I've realised to my embarrassment there is a comedy gonk in the background, which will look even weirder if I turn around and remove it rather than not. I want to get straight on with the guest today because we have got a fantastic guest for you. Because as I've been taken over this show. Oh, I don't believe it. Now someone's ringing a mobile phone. Studio discipline. Perfect. We're going to be talking to David Breakspear in a minute. We'll just do some hellos. Good afternoon, Paul Claridge. How are you? Good to have you tuned in. We'll just do the hellos to people, then we'll get straight on with the guest. And a bit of You Can Do Magic in the background, which is a nice mantra, but not what I wanted in my radio studio, but there you go. Julie Voice. Hello, Julie. How are you? Good to have you tuned in. Barry J. Allen, the regulars turn up, and it's good to see you all. And if you're one of our new listeners as well, very good afternoon to you. Now, in a moment, going to bring him on. We're going to be talking to a chap with a fascinating story. And when I took this over the show on the Wednesdays, I know the original ethos of Men's Radio, as you know, is about men's mental health and well-being. We're blessed that 50% of our listeners are women, which is fantastic. And I wanted to not only hear people's fantastic stories, but also what they've done to turn their lives around and to make a difference, not only in their own life first of all, but in the lives of other people. And that's exactly what our guest today has done. His name is David Breakspear, and I want to bring him to the stage. Hello, David.
Good afternoon, Neil. How are you?
Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Busy, which is always good, especially in my line of work.
Indeed. David, welcome to Men's Radio. I first became aware of you when I edited a podcast, a chap called Andrew Payne.
Yep.
The Men on Show podcast, which is all about showcasing the best of men and men's incredible stories. And you do have an incredible backstory for a start, and feel free to share as much or little of that as you want to. But I'm really interested in the way you've turned things around. And I remember editing that podcast thinking, I've got to get this guy on MRS because what an absolute shining example of, what Andrew's demonstrating in his podcast and of the ethos here. So really over to you. Tell us about yourself, David.
Thank you very much, Neil. Well, it's not as if I've climbed Mount Everest. I actually spent almost 40 years trapped in the revolving doors of crisis and crime, in and out of custody from the age of 15. First arrested at the age of 10.
Sorry, how many years? You dropped out a bit there.
Almost 40 years.
40, right?
Yeah. From a 10-year-old boy up until I was released in 2017, I was involved in the criminal justice system in one form or another. And with age and with hindsight, I'm able to look back and kind of piece together the things that happened to me and the reasons why they happened to me. I was sexually abused at the age of 8 over a period of a year. That was by a toy shop owner. It was a local shop just down the road, literally 100 yards away. So, of course, it was a perfect environment for someone to groom children, owning a toy shop. And again, being older now, I think someone that grew up in the 60s and 70s and 80s were extremely lucky to have not been abused from some of the figures that I've seen for children.
The figures are shocking. I find them very disturbing.
They are indeed. And it's only now that we're starting to hear about detention centres, which is where I first went away, Blantyre House, when I was 15, 1985. But Mendhamsley, Send, there's information coming about there. There's a lot of historic cases now that are being heard through the courts. So it's great that things are being sort of addressed from what happened years ago. But my only concern is about the lessons that are being learned from that. But that's another discussion. But getting back to me, And the thing, I was the youngest of six, and I had quite a good childhood home. Sort of the negative things that happened to me happened outside of the home. I didn't come from a well-off family. We struggled. And for me, going through sort of the younger schools, like infant school and then junior school, because I had to follow my siblings, there was a lot of, oh, you're not like him, you're not like her, you're not like them, you're not like them. And again, with hindsight, I struggled for an identity. I was really, really struggling for an identity. I was playing football for a local youth club, and I changed my first name. I changed my first name to Tony. And when there were reports in the newspaper, be like, well, who's Tony Breakspear? And I don't know why I did it, but again, looking back, I'm sure I did it because I was searching for an identity.
I had a similar conversation with a friend the other day, and it's nothing new. It's the expectations put on people to be a certain way. If anyone is outside of the norm, whatever that is, sometimes they can feel almost ousted from society, and it's wrong.
And it blew up in their faces.
It's messing up kids' mental health to this day.
It is, and it blew up in their faces, really, because when I arrived at secondary school, now that school my siblings didn't go to, when league tables come out, it was voted, it come first in the worst schools in England. It was a terrible school. It's quite embarrassing that I actually got excluded from that school. But I forgot what I was going to go with that now.
That's right.
Sorry, Neil, what was I saying there before that?
You were talking about seeking an ID. You got yourself excluded.
Yeah, the identity. So when I was at secondary school, a couple of my cousins went there, and they were naughty, for want of a better phrase. And after I was there a year, I started being labelled in the same way. Oh, you're just like your cousins. And I fitted in. I thought, great, I've got an identity. This is how I need to act. And I started.
And looking back with a mature mind, it's so easy to understand how a younger mind would adopt a belief like that. It's so obvious now, isn't it?
Well, exactly.
Totally understandable. But just to be banded in with that is unfair.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and going back a little bit further, going back further again, at the age of 10, I contracted meningitis.
Right.
And it was recent. It was after that, shortly after that, or the recovery from that I was arrested for my first crime ever, which was a criminal damage, for which I received a caution. And back then, you're basically dragged in front of the chief inspector, who'd give you a rollicking with one of your parents there. It didn't work because I was back in the same office 2 weeks later getting the same rollicking.
Right.
But I was on a downward spiral from there on in, really. And was kind of surviving life. I wasn't living my childhood. I was surviving my childhood. At 14, I was excluded from school following a number of school suspensions. And then I got placed into the care of the local authority. And then at the age of 15, I got sent to my first custodial sentence. And then at following 15, that,
I mean, this is a failing of the system. It's not that you did anything wrong here. This is what I'm picking up.
I did. I did. Let's not get away from that. I mean, you don't go to jail for being a good boy. Do you know what I mean?
No. But I meant in the early days. You know, a bit of. You know, I meant. I don't mean the later stuff so much. But I mean,
I was a pain
when you were 15.
When I was a child, more than I was a criminal. I mean, I was committing what is known as inquisitive crimes, sort of low-level offences.
Exactly. But obviously there was a reason why you were acting out that way, and the whole system sought to manage you rather. But okay, did anyone actually sit down and ask you deeply what the problem is?
No, you can ask. No, they didn't. They just
did anyone act like they cared a damn apart from managing you? That's the
as I say, I got labelled, and not just me, loads of other children as well, got labelled as being challenging and disruptive. And again, when you are that young, you're searching for an identity. Fine. If that's the label that you're going to give me, that's the label I'm going to play up to. No, I'm not saying I've not got my own part to play in that. Again, of course I have. But it wasn't until later life, in 2010, that I was diagnosed with certain personality disorders, as well as ADHD. And for me, that kind of, they weren't excuses, these diagnoses, but they were reasons. And it
Yeah.
become, if you like, in my later life, it then become a blueprint for how to be able to move forward. Um, Again, with age, in a way, I kind of, it's easy to say this, but it wasn't easy to do it. I kind of grew up, stopped believing or thinking that the world owed me a favor, and I had a word with myself and started to sort myself out.
Yeah.
But I could only do that once I knew how my brain was working, because then I could work with it rather than against it.
Exactly. Once you know the map, the territory becomes easier to
And it's
manage.
changing now, but
Very
obviously
much so.
I'm only going
I
back
think
a few years, but there was nothing. There was
I know
really
that there
nothing.
wasn't back then. I mean that
There's no
um,
screening. I mean,
no,
it's
nothing, and kids just labelled as, oh, you name it, disruptive, challenging. I've even heard of something called oppositional defiant disorder. Who wrote
my
that?
son's diagnosed with that. Yeah,
Is that right?
my
Goodness.
son's diagnosed with that, and he's diagnosed with ADHD as well.
Right.
And he's someone that, sadly, but statistically, also found the criminal justice pathway. Fortunately, he's kind of managed to spot his exit signs and has left it again,
Good,
but
good,
there's
good.
still outstanding stuff going on. And the way that he was treated by the court because of his ADHD was quite refreshing to see. A conversation with his solicitor and the prosecutor and
Yes.
the judge took place that, for me, sounded as if it was a normal conversation that they would have in court. So it's been embedded. It's being embedded. People's neurodiversity and the understanding and awareness of their neurodiversity is not
It
just
is
being embedded in
starting
the
to come
courts
now. If there is
and
a
the
blessing,
PlayStation, because we're getting more of an understanding about it.
exactly.
And
If
that's
there is a blessing, at last we're starting to have the
exactly. And
science. Frankly, the
yeah,
science to
and
understand
for
it.
me, that's why I don't look back with anger, because it's not.
Mm.
It's very difficult to point the finger when no one really knew. Yes, there could have
Yeah.
been different ways that they could have handled me, spoke to me. I mean, I was a brilliant rugby player at school, and the problem was that they were using that as a stick against me rather than as a carrot. Had they have focused on my rugby and built my education, embed my education around that, the chances are we wouldn't be having this conversation today.
And
I would have gone
instead,
on a
it was
path.
behave yourself or you won't do rugby kind of thing, was it?
Yeah, basically, yeah. They kept saying to me, if we kick you out of the school, you're not going to have a school to represent, and therefore you won't be able to represent your district. Because I was representing my district at the time and also going
Yeah.
to go on to represent my county. So there was a pathway that was there in place. But again, I was too challenging and disruptive to be able to spot it for myself. And
You've raised
I
two
wasn't
brilliant
guided.
points already. Sorry, after you.
No, I was just going to say, and I wasn't guided to go down that path. If you like, I was left to fend for myself.
Well,
But
exactly.
but it's very difficult to blame anybody because they don't know. You can't accuse someone of being ignorant if they don't know something. And
Well,
but
exactly. And
we
you've
can
raised a
these
very
days.
good point there.
We
You've
know
raised a
too
very,
much now.
yeah, you've raised two fantastic points so far. First of all, carrot, not stick every time. And just a little difference like that in the early days could have made a difference. And secondly, and you put this very explanation for it. It still took you, to use your words, having a word with yourself and taking responsibility to change it. You didn't
Because you
stay
can, it's only you. It's only you. No one
Yeah,
can do it
exactly.
for
You didn't stay stuck
have
in
to
blame,
want
which
it.
ultimately is
No,
right. You have to want to do it. Yes,
but
absolutely.
but then I needed to be in the right frame of mind as well, and I needed to have the right mindset to be able to view it that way. And of course, that was something that came with age, and that come with something because even though I was kicked out of the education system at a young age, I love to learn. I still do love to learn.
Me too.
And learning in prison, although in a way I become a mentor in prison, but most of my education in prison, most of my education comes from prison. And one day I chose to give back whilst in prison. I become a mentor for a charity called Shannon Trust. And if
Yeah.
people aren't aware of who they are, they're a charity who go into prisons and they train people who can read. And if they want to become a mentor, to then go on to teach people who can't read to read. And that really that sort of started to open my eyes a little bit more to who I was an individual and who my peers were around me. and how common my story was of sexual abuse, of struggling for an identity,
Yeah.
struggling at school, exclusion from school. I wasn't as unique as I thought. And on the
No,
back of that, I become a
no.
listener for the Samaritans.
Yeah.
And that gave me a deeper understanding of those around me. But all of this was taking in place in prison. And therefore, if you like, added to me becoming institutionalized. I was a better person in prison. I meant something in prison. I had self-worth, self-esteem in prison. I was valued in prison. I was respected in prison because of the stuff that I was doing. But when I
Mm.
come out of prison, I had nothing. I was no one. I was I was lost, if you like. I was lost back into society, into society, and that's what happens when you become institutionalized. You become so used to the
Mm.
environment, the surroundings, and it doesn't take long for people to become institutionalized. And
No,
as
I'm
I
sure.
mean, I was in and out. I was 9 sentences over that period I served, and
Goodness me.
my last one ended in 2019, but that was
Right.
when I come off license. I was released in 2017. I still had a 2-year license to see through. But yeah, that's where we are now.
It's an incredible story, terribly poignant and sad in one way, and almost and all, but it's balanced with an incredibly inspiring as well of what it is possible to do when one, because we talk an
Yeah,
awful lot on this show about empowerment and tools for empowerment and all that sort of thing. And this is why I wanted you on. I remember you saying in the podcast, in Andrew Payne's Men on Show podcast, great podcast by the way, that you became a better person in prison. You took what you'd learned in prison outside of
that's
prison,
what
and
I've done this time. That's what
and
worked this
and,
time
and
around.
this time, yeah. So
But I didn't do
what
it on
was
my
the
own
difference?
either, Neil. I didn't do it on
Sorry.
my own either. I had support this time through
Most
the
people
gay
don't.
support.
Most people don't.
Exactly. And
Any kind
that's
of personal
important.
growth journey is
You
never really undertaken. It's a
No,
paradox because it's only us that can do it, but we can't do it without others.
no, we
It's a
can't do
complete.
it alone. And that's the thing.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
You can influence that readiness in someone to want to change. That can be influenced, I believe.
Yes.
But also, when someone is ready to change, they also need the resources around them for them to be able to go
Absolutely.
through that change. And
Absolutely.
in prison,
Yeah.
you can do all the work, you can have all the right intentions, but when you come out that gate, it's sink or swim. And if you haven't got someone holding your hand, and I say it as basic as that, if you haven't got someone holding your hand, there's a very good possibility that you're going to end up back in prison because
What was
it's
the
very,
difference?
very difficult.
What was the difference, David, that made the difference on the last time round where you didn't loop back into the system and you thought, right, this time support one thing? How did that all unfold? That this time you turned the corner a different way? How did that happen?
I honestly thought that I throughout my life I'd hit rock bottom a number of times, but I hadn't hit rock bottom as much as I had in 2015. Drugs and alcohol have always kind of run parallel to my life. Dependency on drugs and alcohol, self-medicating for the things that I didn't know that I had, obviously, until I found out in 2010.
Sure.
And of course, things don't happen overnight, hence why there's a big gap between that and myself in 2017 being released, and to get it right, if you like. But yeah, I was left with a choice. Do I want to live or die? And I chose to live. But I didn't want to live the life that I was leading. So for once, I used the system for my benefit. I used prison for my benefit. Because I become that better person in prison, I basically, what I done was I've got 2 characters, or I had 2 characters, one that existed in prison and one that existed in society. And what I needed to do was I needed to bring the person who I was in prison out with me this time,
Yes.
because I got so much more from, and this is what I do these days. I use my experience to give, my lived experience to give back. But the reason for that is because I got so much more from giving back. I learned so much more about myself and other people through giving back than I ever did through taking. And it really was. I mean, it wasn't an epiphany moment. It kind of is with hindsight, but at that time, I didn't realize that I was just about to embark on a journey of change. It's just going to take me a while because of that institution. I didn't want to do it out here. I wanted to do it in prison. That's where
Right.
the people I wanted to help were. But I now
Yes.
understand that I can have much more of an impact by doing what I did in there out here, and rather than impact on or positively impact on 2 or 3 people at once, I can impact the whole system.
And that's one hell of a thing. I mean, that's big. That's big, and you're perfectly placed. I don't, you know, they say that there's something on earth that only we can do. You know, it's that old thing. But you know, you are uniquely placed because of your experience to do this important and incredible work.
I wouldn't want to live it again, but I wouldn't want to change
No.
my life for the world. I really wouldn't, because what's happened to me has made me who I am, and I am who I am because
Exactly, and again, you've raised the thing that you're in control here. You're in the driving seat. You're taking responsibility. You don't have a shred of so-called victim mentality or blame.
No.
Around you.
I read a quote in a prison library, and it stuck with me, well, ever since, and it really had an impact on me. And it's from Marcus Aurelius, from his meditations writings, and it's, you only have control over your own mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. And it's about controlling yourself. At the end of the day, I used to react. Now I take a step back and I act. And that's a massive difference, because when you can when you're more in control of your reactions, and you can again, you need to understand how your brain's working. I now know why I do certain things that I didn't know before, and not knowing those things could see me going and doing stupid things, impulsive things. But I can now have a different conversation with myself inside my head because I know what's going on up there.
Yes, but as you said before, had you not known what's going on up there, it would be like trying to make this complicated journey in the dark.
You're trying to get through. Yeah, you're trying to get through a maze that you got no chance of getting out of unless someone gives you a map.
Exactly. What you're saying is music to our ears here, because it's all the kind of stuff that we talk about on MRS. We've covered this before. We talk about reacting. In other words, what you were doing, reacting, just acting unconsciously like you did before, a reaction, and flipping it to response ability, the ability to respond. And it's just that, like you said, you stepping back, putting the dark glasses on, having a moment, and then making the choice. It's just slowing the process down, I suppose.
It is slowing that process down. But again, it comes back to understanding how you tick.
I'm going to put some of the comments on. You're getting there's a lot of love in the room. Asa Don Brown, who is very senior in psychiatry in the USA and Canada, and he always chips in with some worthwhile stuff. As a clinical psych, I firmly disagree with this. Back to what we were talking about earlier. Firmly disagree with diagnosing a child unless it's going to improve the life of a child. Yeah, he's right. Otherwise, it becomes a label,
exactly. And for me, screening is important, not for an outcome of a diagnosis, because at the end of the day, there are people out there who share many traits with people who are neurodivergent, but are not neurodivergent themselves. There are also people who are neurodivergent that don't meet the set criteria and therefore are not diagnosed as being neurodivergent. But for me, screening gives an opportunity for the education system or for the prison or whoever's working with that individual, so that they understand how they work, how they tick. That's what it comes back down to for me. So it's important to know how people think, what people kind of, I'll come back to it again, what make people tick. So I don't think, yes, there are important reasons why a diagnosis is important, but I don't think that it's the a utopia, if you like.
It's not the be all. No, I agree completely. No. It's not the be all and end all. It's a useful metric, and it's certainly probably a relief to know that it's got a name. I used to have OCD, and I thought I was going mad, but when I realised that loads of other people did it. Oh, you as well, and there was a certain relief in that. But then, of course, there's the getting over it. And from what you were talking about earlier as well, there is a danger of you young, frankly vulnerable, and looking for an identity. And Asa says this as well. We often live up to the identity placed on the person, and there can be a danger for a diagnosis to turn into a label to be adopted as an identity as well.
Yeah, children are malleable. We can
Very.
influence the way that children think, either positively or negatively. We can do it positively through praise and encouragement, or we can do it through negatively through labeling.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again,
Absolutely.
we still need to understand. We still need to understand, or we need to understand how the children are thinking, and anything that happened to them as well. I mean, that's the question that needs to be asked right before the label gets given: is what's happened to you? Why
Exactly.
do you feel this is? Do you know what I mean? It's about asking the children in the right ways. I don't think there's a wrong question to ask. It's just that there's the wrong way of doing it. Do you know what I mean? It's
Very much so, and there's been a lot of that wrong way practice, but thank goodness me, it's starting to turn around. Some more comments. Emily K. Owen has presented the show before. Hi, everyone. Getting some love from Kimmy. Bravo, David, for turning everything around. and Liz says, I agree, children need encouragement, growing confidence to see what they like and their strengths. Everyone is too quick to label these days when sometimes there are simpler solutions, and I agree. Hello, everyone, says John.
You learn by making mistakes, but with children, we punish their mistakes. How are they meant to learn if they're not allowed to make mistakes?
Exactly.
It doesn't, obviously not criminal mistakes, but when you look at school exclusions, the majority of children are excluded from school because of persistent and disruptive behaviour. If it's persistent and disruptive, where's the intervention to stop that persistent and disruptive behaviour? Why are we letting it get to an exclusion point?
Exactly. Exactly.
And you know what, Neil? Sorry, I was going to say that
please.
When you read the reports about school exclusions, you'll see that this is quite uncommon. School exclusions are quite rare. The numbers, when you consider how many children there are in school of children who be excluded, are quite low. But in 2017, when I was last in prison, the Institute of Public Policy estimated that out of 85,975 people in prison, 54,164 had been excluded from school, which is over 60% of the prison population. So children being excluded from school now may be rare, but it's going to impact them later on in life when they're adults.
Yeah, and that's the hangover from what happened many years ago, which is why it's so coincidence. Yeah. I think not. Yeah, I think not. You talk about a lived experience mentor. Now, I must admit, I'd not heard that term before. I did Andrew Payne's podcast, Men on Show, and it's quite self-explanatory. But tell us a little bit more about this, and tell us about the work you do today. Where do you go, and how do you advertise yourself? Just curious how someone would type in to find you. Do you have a website, by the way? I'll put it on the screen.
LinkedIn is the best place. LinkedIn is where I'm most active. LinkedIn is where I share most of my work. But yeah,
so just type in David Breakspear on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Lived Experience team at a number of charities. I'm a member of the Lived Experience team at a charity called Revolving Doors. I've been there a number of years, and I've kind of grown there because I'm now a peer mentor there, and I'm also a training facilitator there. Because it's one thing having lived experience and another thing having a voice, but being able to use them in the right way to have as much impact as possible is something else, and that's what we're trying to do with Revolving Doors. The other I'm a member of the lived experience team at the Samaritans because I have a lot of indirect and direct experience of suicidality from in prison and out here, especially from being a listener. As well as my own experience. But I'm also a lived experience influencer for the National Suicide Prevention Alliance.
I definitely want to talk more about this in a moment, but
please do. I mean, for me, the reasons why I do what I do with the Samaritans and the National Suicide Prevention Alliance is because I don't want people to be in prison. Sorry, I don't want people in prison to be ignored when the discussions are being had. I want to bring the criminal justice system voice to the table, if you like. That doesn't mean I don't pretend to be the voice of the criminal justice system, but I have a voice of the criminal justice system, and that's what I want to ensure is at the table that people in prison are not being forgotten when it comes to policies and procedures around suicide prevention.
And talk to us a little about suicide prevention. I mean, the statistics. I mean, suicide is the most common death in.
The statistics are shocking. There were I think it was September last year, there were 97 deaths by suicide in prison. And for me, most of those could have been prevented. I'm not saying that all suicides can be prevented. It'd be great if they could be, but we need to do as much as possible to at least reduce the number of suicide
And what
prevention.
can we, and with your experience, what can we do, both in prison and outside of prison?
Well, again, I mean, it comes down to screening. You've got to understand who's coming through the prison gate and what issues that they're bringing with them. We know the reasons, if you like, why people why people take their own lives. I'm so thingy not to say the word committed that I say it. It's mad. Don't say it, and it comes out. So I apologise.
No, don't worry. It's our minds. We can't process negatives. It's
No,
not saying
exactly.
it's not saying don't think of a pink elephant.
Well, I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate for the right use of language. So I feel a bit of a hypocrite when I do slip up. But we're not perfect. So
No.
occasionally I will slip up from time to time. But yeah, but when you look at the prison system, there was some recent research done, and between 2009 and 2019, there were 263 deaths by suicide of people on remand. So those awaiting trial or awaiting sentencing, and 174 of those were placed on what is known as an ACT, which stands for Assessment, Care and Custody Teamwork. It's a suicide prevention plan for people who are at risk of self-harm or suicide.
Right.
And even people who are sentenced, you're looking at around 47%, I think it is, were on this same document. So it's a document designed to save people's lives, and yet it's failing. If it was existing in the hospitals, or if it existed in schools or any other area of society, there'd be a public inquiry. And yet with prisons, it's overlooked.
Why?
Because it's prison. It's prison, isn't it? It's prison. You the thing is, yes, there are some very nasty, bad people in prison who deserve to be in prison, but that's not everybody. That's not the majority.
No.
The majority are people that have made a mistake, and they're being punished for making that mistake. And that punishment normally lasts for the rest of their life, especially if it happens when you're a child. It's held against you as you go on through life. And when you can't, people talk about the difference between right and wrong. Yes, there is a massive difference between right and wrong, and people do understand the difference between right or wrong. But when you're in an environment where crime is normalized, the difference between right and wrong is you don't talk, you don't tell, you don't grass, you don't snitch. That's not don't commit crime. You know what I mean? That isn't the right or wrong in that area.
It's a different kind of right or wrong. It's a different rule system. Yeah,
exactly. And when you look at the issues around intergenerational imprisonment, so children following their parents and their grandparents into prison, it's a massive issue. So you can understand why children of imprisoned parents and imprisoned families do have a normalization around crime and see right and wrong from a completely different perspective.
Because that's the reality to them.
Exactly. If when it comes back to sexual abuse, if you don't know, you might feel something's not right, but that doesn't necessarily mean to say that you are right, that it isn't right, because unless you talk to someone else, you don't know if it's normal or not. So you think,
and of course, a child wouldn't have the vocabulary to even articulate that.
No,
knowing at that level something's wrong, but probably not been having the words to.
Yeah, I didn't disclose what happened to me until 2008. My God, it was good to get it out. And I didn't.
It must be like a weight lifted off your
I
shoulder.
didn't realize how much it was impacting on me, because obviously I had a mask. I was self-medicating. I had a mask on, so I didn't realize. And I didn't have the emotional intelligence. I've only grown up. I've only got that later on in life, but I didn't have the emotional intelligence either to understand what was going on. So yeah, I mean. Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, that's for sure. But again, it's difficult to kind of talk about it in in a
To
way
say
that
the least,
generates
but a very
empathy
worth.
because it's about crime.
I'm sorry, we lost our connection there for a second. You
Yeah.
said it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and that's why it's difficult to speak from trying to gain empathy, if you like, because it is around crime. But there are reasons that I committed crime, that I went down that path. Yes, I made that choice, but it was from the environment, it was from the mindset that I was making that choice from. That kind of, yeah, the
So
reasons
a
why I
big
went down
part
that
of
road.
your transformation and your journey is a change in mindset.
You
You've
have,
said.
yeah, yeah, rehabilitation. We talk a lot about rehabilitation in the criminal justice system, like it's a destination, but it's not a destination. It's a mindset. It's an attitude. You have to
Yes.
have the mindset of rehabilitation, and that's a mindset that I still have.
Mm.
I've stopped being a criminal. There's been no magic potion. So basically, within me is still a criminal. He hasn't left. Do you know what I mean? I haven't changed my innards. All of that still exists in me, as does the child that was sexually abused years ago. All of that still exists in me. But it's that attitude that I carry of rehabilitation that makes me act in a way that I'm not going to get arrested ever again.
Yeah, absolutely. And an attitude, one would hurt. I mean, if I start throwing out terms like self-acceptance, self-compassion, and stuff like that, self-love, if I dare, all those sorts of things, all that good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Talking about the Shannon Trust and the reading, when I was mentoring there and sort of got into it a bit longer and for longer and longer, what I started to realise was that people can read and people, sorry, they can read, and the reason for their sort of struggle to be able to read isn't because they can't read. It's because they haven't got the confidence, they haven't got the belief. People have put on them, so called them stupid, called them idiots. Do you know what I mean? They've just battered them and battered them and battered them. So when they come out there, they just don't have the confidence. And when you unlock that confidence, the next thing you see, they're in the library taking books off the shelves. They're putting in for university degrees, and that's not being dramatic. That's true. Follow Shannon Trust on social media, and you see the stories that they promote, to see that the journeys of people going through, and not just the learners, but also people like myself, the mentors. What happened to me isn't uncommon. You see mentors that this has changed me. I can't believe how much becoming a mentor has changed me. There's so many people that say that, because you don't, until you do it, you really don't understand the impact it has on you as an individual person. And when you start to become like that, you start to look at things differently. You start
Yes.
to look at yourself differently. Therefore, you start to treat yourself differently. You start to treat
Oh,
those around you differently.
yes,
But it's
absolutely. And
about, it's that inner.
you see
Yeah.
yourself, I suppose, also as a source. So you move kind of from a mindset of lack, I've got to survive, there's not enough, to a
Yeah.
mindset of abundance. I've got loads, overflow,
I
plenty to
hated
share.
myself. I viewed myself as scum. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to be like that. I viewed myself as scum, but I didn't know anything else. And I used, even after getting out of jail this time, at the beginning, I still said to people, "Yeah, but I'm still scum from the gutter." You know what I mean? But I don't talk to myself like that anymore, because I'm not.
No,
I'm not
nor
that
should you.
person anymore. I'm miles away from that person. So exactly, why should I? And all of that sort of negative self-talk, it doesn't disappear completely. Of course, it doesn't. But you just get more attuned to dealing with it and coping with it. You get better at coping with it, and the more and the longer it lasts, the bigger that gap between each episode is. I mean, I can't remember. I suffer from anxiety as well, as having other mental health issues. But with the work that I do, I can't remember the sort of last bad episode I had. Do you know what I mean? Because of that, the mindset that I've got, it's such a positive mindset I have,
Well, it
that
builds on
even when I
itself,
do
doesn't it? And
fall
it
back,
builds, right, and it builds and it builds and it becomes literally a new you, a part of who you are, or the
yeah,
dominant part of who you are.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're here, it's not too far to drop down to here. But if you're
Mm.
up here and you drop
It's
a
a lot,
little
yeah.
bit, you're still up here. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
No,
it
yeah,
doesn't, it
simply put,
doesn't
but
mean
perfectly
nothing's going
stated.
to happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you just get on. You're able to yeah, you're able to deal with the shit in life a little bit easier.
Yeah, I know, and I think everyone's looking for strategies on how
But
to
it's
do that.
about understanding yourself. It's about knowing how you tick. And then the world around you changes. It really does change. And you
Well,
can start
this is the
making things
thing.
work for you rather than against you.
It's all about self-understanding, isn't it? And I think we've
Yeah.
all been taught, no matter what our backgrounds, we've all been taught, I think, in some capacity, that the outer world, at some level, we're at battle with it, and we have to control or manage it.
Mm.
And it could go really extreme, like possibly extreme criminal behavior, or even just being a control freak. But we've all got it a little bit because we've
It's
all
like the
been taught that.
news. The news is sort of like it's there to make you feel
Exactly.
guilty.
And
It's just
not only that,
bullshit.
beamed into your front room with dramatic music put to it. I mean, they couldn't make it any more dramatic if they tried.
And the criminal justice system is obviously promoted through the eyes of fear.
Hugely. I mean, I
And that's
have
blown
had,
up in their faces now because now they want to reform it and change it. The public are going, whoa, 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 hold on a minute. You told us to be mindful of this and be scared of them. Now you
yeah,
want us to help you reform it. So no wonder they're struggling to get the
yeah,
the public's back up on it.
yeah, make your
Backing
mind up.
behind it.
I remember
Yeah.
once I did some work in Feltham Young Offenders Institute, and the lads I met in there, obviously they were young. And there was this most wonderful man. You could make movies about him. His name was Bob, and he was almost he was one of the guards, but he was on first name terms with the kids, as he called them, not inmates, kids. He was almost like the father figure they never had, and it's an interesting statistic that, and the other guards were fine. They weren't like monsters like they're portrayed in some films. Nothing like that at all. They were ordinary men with ordinary jobs, just doing their job. But Bob was different. He had a relationship with the kids, and he was the only one that had never been attacked there, physically attacked in his whole tenure, which spoke volumes. But from what I observed, we did some radio in there, and what I observed is they just needed a chance. They were just vulnerable lads, really. Yes, they made mistakes, but again, they're products of their environment, and they just needed a chance. And with an early intervention, and sadly, Bob's no longer with us, but people like him are very much needed.
They're kids. We cannot expect children to understand how they're acting. We just can't. We need to help them and guide them and encourage them, as I say, to take a different path. But we can't expect them to understand what's going on. They haven't grown up yet. they're still evolving.
The brain's not fully formed.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's said that men in the criminal justice system don't start maturing, that have been trapped in like sort of in and out, don't start maturing until they're 29 and start to sort of change their way of thinking and start maturing, if you like. But that's, again, once you become entrenched in the criminal justice system, it's very difficult to see yourself in any other light than a criminal. And it's also very difficult. It's very difficult to look at others and think that they look at you at anything different than criminal. You feel like you're wearing a sort of, or have a neon light above your head. Do you know what I mean? Whether or not people think that, that's what you think, because that's what the media, that's what the news, that's what they tell us to think. That be fearful of prisoners, be fearful of people that are, do you know what I mean? So,
but if scaring people worked and controlling people by fear worked, then we'd have a perfect world.
We wouldn't have prisons. We wouldn't need them.
So clearly it doesn't work.
It'd be like the nuclear deterrent. The reason why there's not nuclear war is because then everyone knows that we'll wipe everyone out, because once one fires, everyone's firing. So
we've got some more comments which I'd like to share. Getting a lot of love from Kimmy. I could listen to David all day. Yeah, me too. And Asa Don Brown again. Are you familiar with Raphael Rowe's work? I'm sure you are.
I know Raphael, yeah.
Now he seems like a lovely guy.
Sorry for a humble brag, but myself and Raphael back in November, we were both at separate awards, but we both received awards for our work that we're doing in the criminal justice system.
Congratulations. And well deserved as well, because he does some great work as well.
He does some brilliant work. I love the stuff that Raphael does. Yeah, and the thing was, the one thing I love talking about Raphael about is, of course, he was innocent. Now, I was, in a way, between the two of us in that context, I was fortunate. I deserved every second of prison I got. Whether I should have done's another matter, but I deserved it. I was bad. I was naughty. I committed crime. I got caught. I should have been sent to prison. But he was an innocent man, and I just cannot imagine spending one day in prison, let alone 12 years as an innocent man. I just, it's beyond my imagination.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying. I think that's the fear of so many people, isn't it? You know, knowing damn well that you're innocent.
And he was in for a long time as well. I mean,
He
was in for a long time, but he was also sentenced to a long time. So he was having to battle the system for a very, very long time. And
yeah,
the way that he's come through that and does what he does now is just a testament to the guy's mental toughness. It really is.
Yeah, sure. Turning the so-called healing corner and putting, as you are, and putting the work out into the world, where we're in our own unique way, in a way that feels best to us. It's amazing work you're doing. Elizabeth Green, hi Elizabeth. Don't we need to train people how to parent? This comes up an awful lot.
Of course, it comes back to the education system, doesn't it? If we educate our children in the right ways for the right purpose in life, rather than for them just to pass an exam and go on to university and separate the wheat from the chaff. That's how I see the education system. That education needs to change. It has to change. And yes, how can we expect parents to become parents if they had nothing before that? Do you know what I mean? You have to have you need a license to go fishing. Do you know what?
No, I understand. And I think there's also this expectation, like you touched on earlier. We can't expect kids to understand.
Especially if they've come from a broken home. Yeah, if they've come from a broken home.
It's a bit like I could describe strawberries to you until the day I die. But until you've tasted one, you'll never know.
It's the same as prison. You have to break that intergenerational. That chain has to be broken. Otherwise, it'll never break. It will never break. And the one way to we can't hope through luck that a child goes, I've had enough of this. I'm going to try something else and break that chain. We need to intervene when they are children. And give them the tools and the abilities to be able to break that chain.
And those tools and abilities.
And be a parent. And be a parent.
Yeah, there's no. Well, so there's no book written on it. There's a ton of books.
There is, yeah. And it's awareness, really. I mean, a lot of people get into parenthood by accident. So it's how can you be prepared for something you've only got say you find out after 6-8 weeks, you've only got 6 months, 7 months after that to be able to prepare for it. So it's about being pre-prepared. It's about preparing children to become parents before they become parents. And again,
and if you haven't had a previous good experience, it's going to be made a lot harder, of course.
Yeah, and for me, there's not many subjects that are off limits when it comes to teaching our children. It's again the way we teach them. Make it age related, relate to them. No subject is off limits, as I say. There's a few, but
I agree pretty much.
Schools should be more about academia. They should be about life. They should teach kids about life. Who cares?
There's so many things.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, I mean, how many times did you use a sine wave or a tangent? You know,
exactly.
I mean,
I don't think I've ever used algebra, and I'm still alive.
But I've never used it.
Yeah, exactly. You forget so much unless it's your interest, and unless you put it to work for your career. You forget the stuff you were taught at school anyway.
I know, and most of us do. When I did,
and you need the abilities and the skills to be able to live. Because if you haven't, how can you hold down a job? How can you be a parent? How can
you can't? It's like putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, of course. You're setting people up to fail. You're setting people up to fail.
Yeah, on paper, great, but in practicality, not so much.
It starts with the children. We have to start with the children. The more we invest in our youth and children now, the less money that we'll be spending on the criminal justice system. And of course, because of the health inequalities, we'll also be spending less on health as well. It's not rocket science. It's obvious. And the more, again, that we invest, the more likely that these children will go into work. And therefore, they'll be paying back into the system and not taking out the system. I mean, there's so many benefits from investing now. Of course it is. And what we're doing, we're closing down youth centres. We're closing down Sure Start. CAMS 2-year waiting list, 5 years to get a neurodiversity a diagnosis. It's
Yeah.
disgraceful. We're failing our children. We really are.
Yeah.
And that's why I get so angry, because no, fair enough. Back in my day, it weren't around. It wasn't aware then. People didn't. Now we know everything. Now we know so much. To not be doing anything is just, it's just incredulous. It really
Can you just
is.
bear with me for 1 second? I have to put
Yep.
the plug in the wall. I've noticed my computer's not plugged in. Sorry.
No
Don't-
worries. No
Don't normally
worries.
do this on live radio shows, but it proves it's live.
Need some hold
There we go.
music.
You nearly got off the edge. There we go. Yes, indeed. And we're back. It must now. It seems so clear to you. It must be terribly frustrating. What?
In a way, it
I mean,
is.
what stops you ranting at the world on a daily basis? I
when
wouldn't blame you
I
if you did.
say, because of the work that I do, and I'm able to speak truth to power now, I'm able to use my lived experience to influence the way that people think. You need to understand better. Yeah, exactly. It's there's no it's like cancer, isn't it? There's no it attacks everybody. This
Yes,
it's
I
the
was
same thing.
discussing this issue with a friend the other day about how people rich on paper, the parents own 4 Ferraris and they're super rich and they have all the holidays and all the money, and yet the kids suffer from tons of mental illnesses, anorexia, whatever. And the theory we come up with is expectation, this high expectation, and again, it's trying to cut the person to fit the cloth.
Yeah,
Rather
exactly.
than nurturing that person.
And school abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, bullying is just as bad in public schools as it is in a bad secondary school.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
it's
We might
just
not.
as bad. It is just as bad. It just
we
means
get
that
some more comments here.
they've got
Elizabeth
more money
says-
to get therapy for them. That's what happens.
And again, another
100%.
another
100%.
false economy.
What Elizabeth is saying there is, once you start believing yourself, and that's what's going back to the reading and other things as well, and also people that before you speak to them were wanting to take their own lives. If you can teach them, if you can get them thinking good about themselves, believing in themselves, self-confidence and self-worth, you're saving their life. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it
and
is,
that's no
it should
small
come down
thing.
to
And to
self-confidence.
believe that there's a reason, perhaps a reason for living, even if it's just
Yeah.
to enjoy life. Even
Not every kid is going to be academic white, but I mean, David Beckham, for argument's sake, he couldn't even spell what he wanted to be, which was a professional footballer. His education, he had a low level of education. Yet look at him now. He's a multi-millionaire. He's got fantastic kids, fantastic lifestyle. But if he didn't go down the football path and they would have forced him down the education path, he would have.
We wouldn't have had David Beckham.
And he would have been in prison. He would have probably ended up in prison. But because and well played to his parents, because they probably knew and they saw. But he was a brilliant footballer, so they focused on his football.
And focused on his talents and what comes natural to us. And there's many kinds of intelligence. I think there was I read Tony Bazan writes books about this, and there's many sorts of intelligence. Academia is valid, but it's only one.
We need accountants, we need professors, but we also need musicians, we also need artists, we also need sculptures. You know what I mean?
It's a diverse world.
We have to focus on what the child is good at.
Exactly, and also not what you expect the child to be, because
if they teach us too much, we'll ask too many questions, and we won't be in a democracy.
Family tradition, kids don't fit into little bits like meant to.
No, they don't want to educate us to too much a higher level in case.
Sorry, you cut out there. Say that bit again.
I was saying they don't want to educate the society too much, otherwise we'll take over. We realise what a joke they actually.
Oh no, we couldn't have people asking intelligent questions. No, couldn't have that at all.
No, exactly.
No, whenever anyone,
and whenever anyone comes out, regardless of your views of David Icke, but someone similar to him or someone like that, whenever they come out and speak their mind, they're immediately called conspiracy theorists and crazy. But that's the establishment for you.
Yes, indeed. I think David Icke's one of those things. I can agree with some things that he says, and some are just way left field for me.
Yeah, totally agree. I totally agree. But there are people out there. I mean, there are some truths in what he says. and there's also some truths in what other people say as well. But again,
Yes, yeah. I think elevating. Here's another thing. I think elevating anyone to the status of guru, self-appointed or otherwise, is not a good idea.
I remember that swimming pool in pajamas.
Yeah, I remember that. We had to get bricks off the bottom of a rubber. Was it bricks off the bottom of a swimming pool?
But again, it's skills for life. Skills for life. It's still education. Do you know what I mean? It's.
You're right. When I did, do you know, David? I did a week's NLP, neuro linguistic programming.
Oh, I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Now, in that week, I remember thinking, why is this not taught at school? Why is this not taught at school?
Exactly.
It's, you know,
well, I took modelling from NLP, and I sort of modelled what I do now and what I was doing in prison on people that have been before me.
Yeah, for the benefit of people that don't know NLP, modelling it doesn't mean like catwalk. It means finding a behaviour that works and copying it, modelling it, mimicking it,
making it work
doing it yourself. Because the theory is, if one human being can do it, pretty much all can. You know,
and that's what NLP is based on, isn't it? It's based on
pretty much it's
going out, speaking to or evaluating people who are all at the top of their game and finding out why they're all at the top of their game. There's
exactly.
a reason why they're so successful. What did they do to get there? And
exactly, modelling excellent. And notice that's trying to it's modelling what works rather than trying to fix what doesn't. Key difference.
Yeah, and my modelling was on people that have previously been in prison and were now doing the things that I wanted to be doing.
Right. Then perfect modelling. Elizabeth Green says, guys, it's not a them and us world. It's a world that shines for everyone with no one left out. And she says, why do you focus on his lifestyle? He's a brilliant human being. I'm not sure what you mean there, Elizabeth. Can you give me some context on that? Asa says, my family relocated to the States from British Columbia because of the low bar set within the school system. We wanted our children to have an opportunity to achieve and succeed. I agree with Elizabeth Green's impressions too on self-esteem, self-love, and either psychological foundations.
Until
and Elizabeth says
Beckham. Until we reform the education system, the criminal justice system is pointless. Reforming the criminal justice system absolutely pointless, because the education system feeds criminal justice system. It's a constant. The school to prison pipeline, as it's known, it's constant, absolutely constant, and we need to close that off.
I mean, the fact that we even have the phrase in our bloody lexicon, school to prison pipeline.
Exactly. And it has a massive impact on society and the way society is.
Of course it does.
And the thing is, although if you like, I do what I do to make life a little bit easier for people who are in the criminal justice system, caught up on the criminal justice system, so my peers, I also do it for the sake of society. It's the more people that come out of prison less likely to reoffend and commit another crime, the safer our communities are going to be.
It's to be honest, I'm mindful of time, but I mean, as I meet you today, I think you're a wonderful chap, and I wish you all the very best. Really, really lovely diamond geezer, and I really wish you all the very best with everything, sir. Keep in touch with us here at MRS, and if you'd like to come back on, or if you want to take some new stuff that you want to tell the world about, by all means, we can have you on again, because I do the Wednesday show now, so just hit me up on LinkedIn or one of the socials, and we'll get you back on. Lovely to use this as your forum.
That sounds great. Thank you.
And it's really been quite a challenging subject, but in a sense, a very uplifting conversation as well. Reason for hope, I think we can take.
Yeah, two of my favourite hashtags that I use are change is possible and what can be. It's not about what is or what was. It's about what can be, and being the best version I possibly can of myself.
Well, you're certainly being that, in my humble opinion. David Breakspear, thank you so much for being on, and please keep in touch.
I will do, and thank you everyone for listening. Your questions. Thank you.
All the very best, sir. Take care.
Take care, Neil. See you later. Bye-bye.
Wow. Told you he was good. There we go. That's going to be the caliber on Wednesday. Some absolutely top-notch guests. We're talking to Mike Nicholson next week, all about progressive masculinity. There's some there's some good work going on in the world at the moment, and I think you certainly won't read about it in the Daily Star. Although I did learn something quite interesting in the Daily Star today, and I can't remember what it was. It's gone out of my head now. But I was like, oh, I didn't know that before, which is quite unusual for the Daily Star. But anyway, this has been MRS for a Wednesday. Russ and Phil Dave are here on Friday, and the Screen Queen Chantal talking about all the fantastic things to watch. And there's loads of stuff, top TV to watch at the moment. And Chantal is a brilliant curator of an awful lot of that. And I'll be back on Monday. I'm sorry I wasn't here Monday, by the way. I was unwell, but bounced back now. I'm feeling good now. So I will see you in Fine Fettle next Monday. Phil and Russ and Phil and Russ are going to be here on Friday. I'll see you with Russ on Monday, and back by myself with Mike Nicholson next Wednesday. Once again, thank you so much, David Breakspear. An absolutely brilliant guest. Enjoy the rest of your day. You take the best of care. Good afternoon.